Talia Whitfield was 34 years old when she came home on her 12th anniversary to find her key didn't work. New locks, her suitcases already packed and waiting on the porch like trash set out for collection. She knocked. She called. Desmond didn't answer. A neighbor mentioned the moving truck from days earlier, the one that had quietly emptied her closet while she was at work, planning a dinner he'd never eat. Taped to her suitcase was an envelope, not a card. Divorce papers, filed 3 weeks ago, without one conversation. He hadn't even bothered to tell her himself. Talia stood on the curb, holding everything she owned in 2 suitcases, humiliated, alone, watching the street like it might offer an answer. That's when a black town car slowed in front of the house and stopped. A driver stepped out first. Then a man in his 60s, silver-haired, unmistakably wealthy, the kind of man who didn't pull up to a curb like this by accident. Desmond didn't know that man owned the company he worked for. He didn't know Talia had designed his lobby for free years ago, and that he'd never forgotten her name. He had no idea what had just pulled up outside his own front door. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The salmon didn't take long to marinate. Talia had been up since 5:30, moving quietly through the kitchen while the morning was still dark and cool. She mixed the glaze by memory. Honey, soy, a squeeze of fresh ginger, the same way her father used to make it on special occasions. The smell of it filled the kitchen and made the house feel warm and alive in a way it hadn't felt in a while. She told herself that was about to change. 12 years. That was worth a real dinner, worth effort. She arranged the table with the good plates, the white ones with the thin gold rim that they'd registered for and barely used. She folded the linen napkins into neat rectangles and set 2 candles in the center, unlit. She stepped back and looked at it all and let herself feel good about it for a moment. Then she went to the bedroom closet and pulled down the flat leather portfolio from the top shelf. It was navy blue and worn soft at the corners, the kind of folder that looked like it had seen serious work. Inside were 31 pages of sketches, floor plans, mood boards, material swatches taped to cardstock, a rough business plan typed out and clipped to the inside cover. 2 years of quiet planning, done in spare hours, done carefully, done in secret, not because she was hiding it, but because she wanted it to be ready before she said it out loud. Renee Interiors. Her father's name. Her name, too. She'd put her career on hold the year after they got married, when Desmond's job had transferred them to a new city and the timing just never seemed right to start over. It was supposed to be temporary. That was the word they'd used. Temporary. And somewhere along the way, temporary had stretched into 12 years, and the firm her father had left her, a small but respected commercial design outfit, had been sitting under Desmond's management, quiet and barely active. Desmond had offered to manage it as a favor. "Just until you're ready," he'd said. She was ready now. She wanted to show him tonight, over dinner. The portfolio, the plan, the new chapter. She imagined his face, surprised, then proud, and she tucked the folder carefully back into its place to bring out later. She heard him on his phone in the hallway, voice low. He'd been doing that a lot lately, taking calls in the other room, turning slightly away if she walked in. She'd noticed it the way she noticed everything. Quietly, without making a scene, filing it away. She'd told herself it was work stress. The promotion he'd been chasing had everyone at his firm on edge. He appeared in the kitchen doorway just before 8. He was already dressed, jacket on, bag over his shoulder, earlier than usual. "I didn't hear you getting ready," she said. "Early meeting." He didn't look at the table. He looked at his phone, then at the door. "I set up dinner for tonight. The salmon—" "Yeah." He was already moving. "Okay." She watched him. His eyes had done something strange when she spoke. A small flinch, barely there, like she'd said something that landed wrong. But he was already pulling his keys from the hook by the door, and then he was gone. The sound of the door shutting sat in the kitchen for a moment. She stood still, let it settle. Then she picked up her own keys. She had an errand to run. A stop at the print shop on Callaway to pick up the business cards she'd ordered as a small private test, just to see the name printed, just to make it feel real. She'd be back in an hour, long before Desmond got home. The print shop was only 20 minutes away, but she took the long way back through their neighborhood, the way that looped past the old park where the oak trees grew wide and the roots pushed up through the sidewalk in big, crooked ridges. She was almost home when Mrs. Durbin from 2 doors down waved at her from the sidewalk. "Talia, hey! Glad things are getting sorted over there." She smiled the way neighbors do, warm but slightly nosy. "That moving truck was blocking my whole driveway for a bit, I have to say." Talia slowed. "Moving truck?" "Earlier this week. Tuesday, I think. Big white one." Mrs. Durbin tilted her head. "Storage, maybe?" "Must be a mistake," Talia said. She kept her voice easy. "Nothing's been moved." "Oh." Mrs. Durbin looked uncertain. Well, you know better than I do." Talia smiled, said goodbye, kept walking. Must be a mistake. She repeated it to herself as she turned up the front walk, her print shop bag in one hand, her keys in the other. She pushed the house key into the lock. It didn't turn. She pulled it out, tried again. Slower this time, thinking maybe she'd grabbed the wrong one. Same key, same lock, same result. The key didn't fit anymore. She stood on her own front porch and looked at the door and understood, in a way that started in her chest and moved outward like cold water, that the lock had not malfunctioned. The lock had been changed. She knocked, 3 times, firm, the kind of knock that said, "I know you're in there." Silence. She knocked again, harder this time, and called his name through the door. "Desmond!" Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Desmond, open the door!" Nothing. She stepped back and looked at the windows. The blinds were down. Every single one, she noticed now. All of them closed tight, like the house had turned its face away from her. She pulled out her phone and called him. It rang once. Then voicemail. His recorded voice, smooth and professional. "You've reached Desmond Whitfield. Leave a message." She hung up, called again, straight to voicemail this time. He'd declined the call. That was when she turned around and saw the suitcases. They were stacked neatly against the porch railing, partially hidden by the angle of the door. 2 large ones she recognized, dark gray with the broken zipper pull on the smaller bag that she'd been meaning to fix for months. Sitting on top was her tote bag, the canvas one she used for errands. Folded on top of that, her winter coat. All of it packed, all of it waiting. Her legs went somewhere distant from her body. She sat down on the porch step because there was nothing else to do. She stared at the suitcases for a moment that had no real length to it. Mrs. Durbin was still outside, watering the flower bed along her front walk, pretending not to watch. Talia walked over. She kept her face neutral. "The moving truck you mentioned," she said. "Tuesday. Do you remember what time?" The older woman set down her watering can, and her expression shifted into something careful, like she was suddenly aware she'd already said too much. "Late morning, I think. Maybe 11? "And you said personal items?" "That's what the man told me when I asked. I was curious because of the driveway." She paused. "Honey, I thought you knew." "I was at work Tuesday," Talia said. Mrs. Durbin went quiet. "Thank you," Talia said. She walked back to the porch. She sat back down on the step. Tuesday. She'd been at the print shop on Tuesday too, actually. No, that was today. Tuesday she'd been at the florist, picking up the small arrangement she'd put on the dinner table this morning. She'd been gone for less than 2 hours. He had done this while she was out buying flowers for their anniversary dinner. She breathed in. She breathed out. Her eyes caught something she'd missed before. A white envelope, sealed, taped to the side of the larger suitcase with a strip of clear packing tape. No name on the outside, just tape and paper, clean and flat, like a label on a file. She peeled it off, opened it. Inside was a folded stack of papers, creased in thirds. Legal paper, the kind with fine print that fills every inch. She unfolded them slowly. At the top of the first page, in plain block letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." She read the date stamp in the corner, filed 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. She flipped through the pages. Desmond's signature was already on the last one, neat and practiced, the same signature she'd seen on Christmas cards and loan documents and the deed to their house. Under grounds for dissolution, 3 words, irreconcilable differences. No conversation, no warning, no word. 6 weeks ago, he had walked into a courthouse and signed his name to the end of their marriage, and then he'd come home that night and eaten dinner across from her and not said a single thing. She thought about what she'd made for dinner 6 weeks ago. She thought about whether he'd said it was good. She called him 4 more times standing on that porch. Each one went to voicemail. She stopped leaving messages after the second one, when she heard her own voice and didn't like what it sounded like. Too tight, too close to breaking. She called Yolanda. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. Yo! She stopped, started again. It's me. Something happened. Call me back. She hung up. She looked at the suitcases. She looked at the closed door and the closed blinds and the envelope in her hand. The sun had started to drop while she wasn't paying attention. The sky above the oak trees at the end of the street was going orange and pink, the light turning that particular shade of gold that usually made the neighborhood look beautiful. Right now, it just made the shadows longer. She picked up the handles of both suitcases and walked them down to the curb. She sat down on the larger one. The print shop bag was still looped over her wrist. Inside it, 10 business cards with her name on them, printed in clean black ink on ivory cardstock. Renee Interiors. She didn't open the bag. She just sat there on her suitcase at the curb, the divorce papers folded in her hand, and watched the streetlights begin to come on one by one down the block. She had nowhere to go. The town car moved slowly. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the car itself, but the pace of it. Too slow for someone passing through, the kind of slow that meant someone was looking for something, or had already found it. It was a black sedan, long and clean, without a single mark on it. It rolled to a stop at the curb maybe 20 feet from where she sat. Talia didn't move. She was still on her suitcase, the divorce papers in her lap, her coat folded next to her. She watched the car the way a person watches something they don't have the energy to fully process yet. The driver got out first and opened the rear door. The man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped silver hair and a dark suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who've stopped noticing what things cost. He was in his 60s, maybe, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had aged into something better, sharp and settled and unhurried. He stood on the sidewalk and looked around the way people look around when a neighborhood feels familiar but they can't quite place it. Then he looked at her. She watched him recognize her. It wasn't instant. It moved across his face in stages, a slow assembling of something. His brow came down slightly, his head tilted, and then it cleared. Talia Renee, he said. Not a question, just the name, placed with certainty. She stood up slowly. Mr. Rain, she said. Augustus Rain. She hadn't seen him in almost 9 years. The last time she was 25 years old, standing in the half-finished lobby of his flagship building on Monroe Street, with paint on her forearms, explaining to him why she'd chosen brushed brass over chrome for the fixture trim. His original contractor had walked off the project mid-build. A mutual contact had connected them. She'd spent 6 weeks finishing what someone else abandoned, working nights and weekends, and when he'd tried to pay her, she told him to donate the fee to a trades apprenticeship program instead. He had not forgotten that. She could see it in how he was looking at her now, not like a man who vaguely remembered a name, but like a man who had filed her away in a place he kept the things that mattered. His eyes moved to the suitcases, to the papers still in her hand, to the closed blinds on the house behind her. He didn't ask what happened. He asked one question. Is there anyone coming for you? She opened her mouth, closed it. I left a message for my friend. She hasn't called back yet. He nodded once, like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. I have a guest house on the east property, he said. It's empty. It has a working kitchen, a good lock on the door, and nobody will bother you." He paused. "No conditions, no obligation. I owe you more than a place to sit down, and we both know it." She looked at him. She thought about saying she was fine. She thought about calling Yolanda again and sitting on this curb in the dark until someone picked up. She looked at the house one more time, at the blinds that hadn't moved, not once, not even when she'd knocked hard enough to feel it in her knuckles. "All right," she said. "Thank you." The guest house was quiet and clean. Stone floors, white walls, furniture that was simple and good. The kitchen had a full coffee setup and a bowl of fruit on the counter that someone had left recently. The bedroom had a window that looked out over a garden, dark now, just shapes in the night. She set her suitcases down and sat on the edge of the bed. She held her phone in her hands. At some point in the last 2 weeks, she'd set her old phone back up to sync to this device. A bulk transfer she'd started and forgotten about, the kind of task that took forever and always finished at the wrong moment. At the top of her screen was a notification she hadn't seen before. Backup sync complete. She tapped it without thinking. A folder opened. Old photos, old notes, apps she'd deleted, and a message thread that had restored itself from the backup, sitting in her archive like a stone that had finally surfaced from the bottom of a river. The contact name was just a single letter, B. She opened it. The thread was long. A full year of messages, time-stamped and intact, each one loading cleanly on her screen like it had been waiting for her to find it all along. Hotel confirmation numbers, addresses she recognized as cities Desmond had told her were business trips. Small things, inside jokes and good morning texts, and a message from 14 months ago that said, "I keep thinking about last night." She read for a long time. She read until there was nothing left to read. Then she set the phone face down on the bed beside her and sat very still. Her hands were calm. That surprised her. She checked, and they were completely still. She was not going to call him. She was not going to scream into the phone at midnight and give him the satisfaction of watching her come apart. She was going to find out exactly how deep this went. Every number, every date, every single thing, before he knew she had found anything at all. She picked the phone back up. She started from the beginning. Yolanda picked up on the second ring. I know, I'm sorry. My phone died and I left my charger at the office and then Marcus had his thing at school and I just saw all your calls and—" She stopped. "Talia, what's wrong?" Talia was sitting at the kitchen table in the guest house with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she hadn't touched yet. The morning light came through the window in long, flat strips. Outside, birds were moving through the garden. "I need you to listen," Talia said, "all the way through. Don't talk yet." A pause. "Okay." She told her everything. The locked door, the suitcases on the porch, the neighbor and the moving truck, the divorce papers already filed weeks ago without a word, Augustus and the guest house, and then the messages. All of them, a full year of them, a woman named only B, hotel rooms in cities Desmond had told her were work. When she finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. "He changed the locks," Yolanda said finally. "On your anniversary." "Yes." "And filed before he told you." "Weeks before." Another silence. When Yolanda spoke again, her voice had changed. The softness was still there, but underneath it was something hard and flat, the tone she used when she'd made up her mind about something. "All right," she said. "Here's what we're going to do." Yolanda's plan was simple, and it was smart. Because divorce proceedings had already been filed, Talia had every right to request a full accounting of their shared finances as part of the standard documentation process. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't accusatory. On paper, it looked like routine cooperation, a wife doing her due diligence, nothing more. Desmond would see the request come through and think she was just covering herself in the settlement. He would not think she was looking for anything specific. "Don't call him," Yolanda said. Don't text him. Don't give him anything to react to. Let the paperwork do the talking." "And the firm?" Talia asked. "Request those records too. You co-inherited that business, Talia. You have standing. Frame it as asset disclosure, completely standard in a divorce filing." A pause. "Has he been sending you any reports? Quarterly summaries, anything?" Talia thought about it. "He used to. Last one was maybe 2 years ago." The line was quiet again. "Okay," Yolanda said. "That's a gap. That's something we're going to look at." The documents arrived 6 days later, 2 separate envelopes delivered to the guest house through Yolanda's office address. Talia set them on the kitchen table and did not open them until Yolanda arrived that evening with a yellow legal pad and a red pen and a bottle of sparkling water she set on the counter without asking. They sat across from each other the way they used to sit together in college, heads down, focused, the rest of the world pushed back to the edges. Yolanda opened the first envelope, the joint account records. She spread the pages flat and started moving her finger down the columns. Talia watched her face. Yolanda had a good face for this kind of work. It didn't give much away. But after a few minutes, something tightened around her eyes. "Pull the second envelope," she said. Talia opened the firm records. Her father's firm, his name still on the letterhead, Renee Design Associates, the logo she'd watched him sketch at the kitchen table when she was 9 years old. She smoothed the pages and started reading. The numbers were not right. She knew them well enough to know that much. She had grown up watching her father manage that business, had helped him file reports in high school, had inherited half of it when he died, and handed the management to Desmond, because she'd trusted him, and because she'd been grieving, and because she had not thought, at the time, that trusting her husband was something that needed second-guessing. The accounts were lighter than they should have been. Much lighter. Revenue had come in, she could see it in the inflow columns, but the outflow didn't match any expense she recognized. No vendor payments, no equipment, no overhead she could account for. Just a series of transfers, regular and quiet and spaced about 6 weeks apart, each one going to the same account number. An account number she did not recognize. She circled it in pen. Then she circled it again. She looked up. Yolanda was already watching her. 2 years, Talia said. Her voice was even. This has been going on for 2 years. Yolanda nodded slowly. At minimum. Talia looked back down at the account number. The transfers started small and got larger. Patient, calculated. The kind of thing a person did when they were planning something, building towards something, and needed time to get the pieces in place before anyone noticed. She thought about the hotel confirmations in the message thread, the timestamps, the way the affair and the transfers had started within months of each other. She set her pen down. I need to find out where that money went, she said, before I say a word to anyone. Yolanda uncapped her red pen and pulled the legal pad closer. Then let's figure out how. The knock came on a Thursday morning, soft and uncertain, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they had the right door. Talia set down her coffee and crossed the room. She looked through the glass panel beside the door before opening it. Patrice Whitfield stood on the front step in a tan coat and low heels, holding her purse with both hands. Her silver hair was pinned back the way it always was. She looked smaller than Talia remembered. Older, maybe, or just tired in a way that hadn't been there before. I should have called, Patrice said. I know that. Talia opened the door wider. Come in. Patrice sat at the kitchen table and turned down the offer of coffee twice before accepting it. She held the mug the same way Talia had held hers 2 mornings ago. Both hands, not drinking. A habit, maybe. Or just something to do with your hands when you didn't know where to start. I told myself I was coming to check on you, Patrice said. That's what I told myself in the car. She looked up. But I think I really came because I owe you an honest conversation, and I've been putting it off long enough. Talia sat down across from her and waited. Patrice set the mug down. I knew something was wrong. Months ago, maybe longer. She said it plainly, without softening it. The way he got quiet around you. The way he started talking about his job like you weren't part of the picture. Little things. She paused. They weren't little things. No, Talia said. They weren't. Patrice looked at her hands. I told myself it would pass, that maybe I was reading into it. Her jaw tightened. I've told myself that before. Something in her tone shifted. Talia stayed still. Desmond's father did this to me, Patrice said. Not once. More than once. Different women, different years. And there was money, too. Accounts I didn't know about. Business decisions he made without me. Things I found out about after the fact or not at all. She exhaled slowly through her nose. I stayed. I kept quiet. I told myself it was better to hold the family together than to blow it apart. She finally looked up at Talia. I was wrong about that. And I think I raised a son who learned that the silence was acceptable. That if you were careful enough, patient enough, the people you hurt would just absorb it. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street. Patrice, Talia said carefully, what do you know about what he's been doing? Not specifics. He doesn't confide in me. A short, humorless sound. He never has. But I know how he thinks. I know what he plans for and what he considers an obstacle and what he considers an asset. She paused. And I know he has always kept things separate, compartmentalized. He learned that from his father, too. She reached into her purse and set both hands flat on the table, like she was bracing herself. There's a property, Patrice said. A lake house, about 2 hours north of the city. It belonged to Raymond, Desmond's father. He left it to Desmond when he passed, not to me, which was its own conversation. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Desmond never mentioned it to you. I'm almost certain of that. Talia felt something go very still inside her chest. No, she said. He didn't. It's been in Raymond's name, technically, and the deed transfer was quiet. I don't think it ever came up in any paperwork you would have seen. Patrice looked at her steadily. But it's an asset. A real one. And if Desmond has been keeping it off the books, keeping it separate from the marriage, that matters, doesn't it? It wasn't a question. Patrice knew the answer as well as Talia did. Talia picked up her pen from beside the legal pad she'd left on the table. She wrote down, Lake property, Raymond Whitfield, deed transfer, 2 hours north. She underlined it once. He assumed I'd be quiet, Talia said. Not angry, just clear. He assumed you'd be devastated, Patrice said. And he figured devastated looked like gone. Like you'd take whatever he offered and disappear because it was easier than fighting. She shook her head. I let him believe that was how it worked. I modeled that for him for 30 years. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I'm not going to keep doing that. Talia looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had sat at the other end of the table at 12 years of holiday dinners, who had always been polite and measured and carefully distant, who was sitting here now with her hands flat on the table and her eyes full of something that looked a lot like the resolve Talia herself had been quietly building for days. I need to understand everything he's capable of hiding, Talia said. Every pattern, every habit, every place he might think to put something he doesn't want found. Patrice held her gaze. Then ask me, she said. I'll tell you what I know. The blueprints covered most of the conference table. They were large sheets, crisp and white, rolled out flat and held at the corners by small metal weights. Talia stood over them with her hands clasped behind her back, studying the lines the way she always had, starting from the outside in, reading the shape of a space before she let herself think about what it could become. Augustus stood at the far end of the table, watching her. Take your time, he said. She did. The building was a 32-story corporate tower in the financial district. The bones were good. The atrium was generous, high ceilings, a lot of natural light if the glass was chosen right. But whoever had drawn the interior flow hadn't thought about how people actually moved through a space. The lobby dumped you into a corridor that went nowhere useful. The executive floors were stacked efficiently, but without any personality. Functional, yes. Memorable? No. Talia pointed to the atrium. "This is the problem," she said. "You've got a beautiful entry, and then it just stops. There's no draw, nothing pulling people forward." Augustus crossed his arms and nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I said to the original firm." He paused. They disagreed. They were wrong. He almost smiled. Yes, they were. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "Which is why I'd like someone else on this project." Talia looked up from the blueprints. "You're offering me the redesign contract." "The interior design contract. Full scope. Lobby through executive floors. The architecture is set. Everything inside is still open." He leaned back. "You'd have real authority on this one, Talia. Not consultation, not suggestions. Your name on the work." Her name on the work. She let that land for a moment before she answered. "I'd need to see the materials budget and the timeline," she said. "Of course." He slid a folder across the table. "Take it with you. Think it over." She picked it up and set it beside her bag. Then she looked back at the blueprints. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "The logistics firm," she kept her voice even. "Your company. How many regional divisions does it have?" Augustus tilted his head slightly, just enough to show the question had landed as something more than casual. 7, he said. "Why?" "My husband works there," Talia said. "Desmond Whitfield. He's a regional VP." There was a short pause. Augustus studied her face with the kind of attention that didn't need words to communicate that he was processing something carefully. "I know the name," he said. "I thought you might." She held his gaze. "I didn't know, until recently, how far up the structure went." "He reports up through 3 layers before he reaches my office," Augustus said. "But ultimately, yes, my company." He said it simply, without drama. "Does that change anything for you about this project?" Talia thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "It doesn't." He nodded once. "Good." She was back at the guest house by early afternoon, the folder open on the table beside her legal pad, when her phone buzzed. Yolanda. She answered it before the second ring. "Talk to me," Talia said. "I just got off the phone with Renee." Yolanda's voice was clipped and fast, the way it got when she had information she didn't like. "You remember Renee. She used to work in HR at Desmond's firm before she moved to the legal department." "I remember her." "She knows someone close to the situation. I'm not going to say how close." A beat. "Talia, Bree is pregnant." The room didn't move. Talia's hand stayed flat on the table. "How far along?" 3 months, give or take, which means this has been in motion for a while. Yolanda exhaled. "And here's the part that matters. Desmond knows about it. He's known for at least a month, and ever since he found out, he's been pushing hard to get the divorce finalized, fast and quiet, no disputes, no delays." Talia picked up her pen. "There's a gala," she said. "Augustus mentioned it today. A company event. They're announcing a regional director promotion." "Right," Yolanda's voice sharpened. "A promotion that apparently requires, and I'm quoting what Renee heard, a stable family image, which Desmond does not currently have, given that his wife just got locked out of her own house and his girlfriend is 3 months pregnant." Talia wrote, "Gala, promotion, timeline, Bree, pregnancy." She underlined timeline twice. "So his entire plan," Talia said slowly, "depends on pushing me out the door before anyone at that company looks too closely. Quietly, quickly, with a settlement you sign without reading the fine print, and then you vanish." Yolanda let that hang in the air for exactly 1 second. "That's what he's counting on." Talia stared at the page in front of her, the underlined word, the folder with her name written across the top in Augustus's firm, clean handwriting. She set the pen down. "Yolanda," she said, "the audit. How long until we have the full results?" "Week and a half, maybe 2. "And the gala?" A pause. 3 weeks out. Talia closed the folder. "Then we have time," she said. The law office smelled like coffee and old paper. Yolanda's desk was stacked in neat columns, folders on the left, legal pads in the center, a coffee mug that said, "Don't talk to me before 9, pushed to the far right corner. She was already seated when Talia walked in, pen uncapped, reading glasses on. "Close the door," Yolanda said. Talia closed it and sat down across from her. Yolanda slid a set of documents across the desk. "These are the 2 filings. First one is a formal audit request under your rights as co-owner of the firm. Second is the asset freeze. That one goes through the court, and it locks everything attached to the firm's accounts pending the review." She tapped the top page. "Once you sign both, Desmond can't move money. He can't close accounts. He can't touch anything tied to that firm without it showing up in the audit trail." Talia picked up the pen. "And he won't know I filed these?" "Not right away. The audit request goes to the accountant directly. The freeze is a court order. He'll get notified, but by then it's already in place." Yolanda leaned back. "He'll know something is moving. He just won't know how much you already know." Talia signed both documents without hesitating. Yolanda pulled them back across the desk, straightened the stack, and slipped them into a manila envelope. "I'll file by end of day." She looked at Talia over the top of her glasses. "You doing all right?" "I'm focused," Talia said. "That's not what I asked." Talia looked at the envelope on the desk, at her own signature visible through the open flap. "I'm angry," she said. "But I know what to do with it now." Yolanda nodded. "Good," she said. "That's better than all right." 4 days later, Desmond called. Talia was at the guest house, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. She saw his name on the screen and let it ring twice before she answered. "Talia." His voice was warm, familiar. The voice he used in public, at dinner parties, when he wanted people to think he was the kind of man who had everything handled. "I'm glad you picked up." "Desmond," she said, "I've been thinking about you." A pause just long enough to feel considerate. "I know this has been hard. I know the way things happened wasn't ideal, and I'm sorry for that." She said nothing. She let the silence stretch. "I want this to be clean," he continued, "for both of us. Quick, fair, no ugliness. I think we've earned that much." He cleared his throat. "My attorney put together a settlement offer. It's straightforward. You'd walk away with a lump sum, we split the joint accounts, and we each move forward. No drawn-out process, no court dates." "How much is the lump sum?" she asked. He named a number. It was insulting. Not just low, it was the kind of number that assumed she hadn't looked at a single account statement. The kind of number that only worked if she had no idea what was actually missing. "I'd need to review it," she said. "Of course. Take a few days." He sounded relieved. She could hear it just under the warmth, the small exhale of a man who thought he was winning. "I just want us both to be able to close this chapter and move on. You deserve that, Talia. You really do." "I'll be in touch," she said. She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone face down on the table. Then she picked up her legal pad and wrote the number he'd offered at the top of the page, circled it, and drew a single line through it. The forensic accountant's name was Gerald Moss. He was a small man with careful hands and a habit of tapping his pen against his notepad when he was thinking. He called Talia on a Thursday evening, 6 days after the audit request had been filed. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "I have preliminary findings." She sat down. He walked her through it in plain, careful language. The transfers out of the firm's operating account. The pattern: small amounts first, then larger ones, spread out to avoid triggering automatic flags. A separate account, opened in a name she didn't recognize, that received every dollar. And from that account, a wire transfer. One large payment to a real estate escrow company. "The amount matches the down payment on a residential property," Gerald said. "A condo. Purchase was finalized 8 months ago." Talia wrote it all down. Her handwriting was steady. 8 months, she said. "Yes, ma'am." She thanked him and ended the call. Then she sat very still and looked at what she'd written. The dates, the amounts, the word condo underlined twice at the bottom of the page. 8 months ago, Desmond had been bringing her coffee in the mornings and telling her he loved her before he left for work. She closed the legal pad. The envelope from Augustus arrived the following morning, cream-colored, heavyweight paper, her full name written across the front in clean, formal type. She opened it at the kitchen table and read the single card inside. "You are cordially invited as a guest of Augustus Rain to the Rain Logistics Annual Leadership Gala. In addition, you are requested to present your design concepts for the Rain Tower project to assembled company leadership. Dress, black tie." She set the card down flat on the table. Her name, on the program, in that room. The Hargrove Hotel had 40-foot ceilings and chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. Every surface gleamed: white marble floors, gold trim on the columns, black-suited staff moving through the crowd like shadows. The kind of room designed to make people feel important just by standing in it. Talia had designed rooms like this before. She knew exactly how they worked. She walked in on Augustus's arm, and she was not nervous. Her dress was deep navy, structured at the shoulder, clean through the waist. No jewelry except a single gold cuff on her left wrist. She'd chosen it deliberately. Elegant enough for the room, sharp enough to mean business. Her hair was pinned back low, every strand in place. She looked like exactly what she was tonight, a design consultant, presenting her work to company leadership. Not an estranged wife, not a woman who'd been left on a porch with a suitcase. Something else entirely. Augustus walked at an easy, unhurried pace, nodding to people as they passed. He wore his authority the way some men wore cologne, without effort, without announcement. A gray suit, no tie, a watch that didn't need to show off. "The lighting in here is wrong," Talia said quietly, scanning the room as they moved through it. Augustus glanced up at the chandeliers. "How so?" "Too warm near the bar. Makes the faces look orange in photographs. The firm's photographer is going to hate the east wall." She paused. "Whoever designed this lobby should have tested it at night." He made a low sound of amusement. "I'll pass that along." "You don't have to," she said. "It's not my building." "Not yet," he said. They parted at the edge of the main floor. He moved toward a cluster of senior partners, and she drifted toward the presentation area near the far wall, where a printed board displayed renderings of the Rain Tower project. Her renderings. Her name on the placard in 12-point type. She stood in front of them for a moment, just long enough to read her own name. Then she turned around to face the room. She spotted Desmond 20 minutes later. He was across the floor, near the bar, holding a glass of something amber. Dark suit, silk tie, the navy one she'd given him for their 10th anniversary. He was laughing at something another man had said, head tilted back, hand flat against his chest. Performing ease. She knew that laugh. She'd watched him use it at every company event they'd ever attended together. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him the way she watched a room she was about to redesign. Calmly, taking inventory, noting every detail that didn't quite work. The slight tightness at his collar, the way his eyes moved to the entrance every few minutes, waiting for someone. Then Bree came through the door. She was in red, floor length. Her hair was soft around her face, and the pregnancy was visible now, a gentle curve that her dress didn't try to hide. She moved through the entrance with the careful confidence of a woman who'd been told she belonged there, and she probably believed it. Desmond saw her and crossed the room in 12 steps. He took her hand, kissed her cheek, and turned to introduce her to the two executives standing closest to him. Talia was too far away to hear the words. She didn't need to. She could read it in the way the executives smiled and extended their hands, in the way Bree touched her stomach, once, brief and instinctive, in the way Desmond put his hand at the small of her back, claiming, presenting, establishing. Fiancé. That's what his posture said. This is my fiancé. The divorce wasn't finalized. The ink on those papers wasn't even dry. Talia looked down at the glass in her hand. Water, not wine. She'd planned it that way. She needed her mind exactly as clear as it was right now. She took one slow breath, let it out through her nose. Then Desmond turned, and he saw her. She watched it happen, the easy smile going still, the glass stopping halfway to his mouth. A half-second of pure, open confusion that he couldn't control before his face rearranged itself into something smoother, something practiced. He looked at her, then at Augustus across the room, then back at her. She didn't look away. She didn't smile, and she didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze for 3 full seconds, the way you look at something you've already figured out. And then she turned back to her rendering board like he was a detail she'd already accounted for. Her heartbeat was steady. Her hands were steady. She pulled out her phone and typed 2 words to Yolanda. "Come in." Yolanda appeared at the entrance 4 minutes later in a black blazer and low heels, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She moved without hurry, without drama, scanning the room once before finding Talia's face. She walked over and stood beside her, close enough to speak quietly. "It's all in here," Yolanda said, touching the edge of the portfolio. "Gerald signed off this morning. Every page." "Good." Across the room, an event coordinator had begun moving toward the small stage, the signal that remarks were coming, that the promotion announcement was minutes away. Augustus appeared at Talia's side without a word. He looked at the portfolio, then at the stage, then at Talia. "There's a lounge off the east corridor," he said quietly. "Private. My counsel is already there." He said it simply, like it was a logistical note, like this was just the next item on the evening's schedule. Talia picked up her presentation folder. "Lead the way," she said. The private lounge was quiet in the way expensive rooms always are. Thick carpet, heavy curtains, walls that knew how to keep secrets. A long mahogany table sat in the center, with 6 chairs around it. 3 of them were already filled. Augustus's legal counsel, a trim man named Gerald Park, sat at the far end with a yellow legal pad in front of him. Patrice Whitfield sat 2 seats down from him, hands folded on the table, her gray wrap dress neat and still. She'd arrived an hour before the gala started, at Talia's instruction, and she'd waited without complaint. She looked up when Talia walked in. Something in her eyes was sad and steady at the same time. Talia gave her a small nod. Augustus closed the lounge door behind them. The sound from the gala, the clinking glasses, the low hum of 200 people making themselves impressive, went muffled and distant. Yolanda set the leather portfolio on the table and unzipped it without ceremony. She pulled out a clean, tabbed stack of documents and set them in the center of the table. Audit findings, bank records, transfer histories, a property deed, everything. Gerald Park looked at the first page. His expression didn't change much, but his pen started moving. "We'll need Whitfield in here," Augustus said, not a question. "He's on his way," Yolanda said. "I had the event coordinator tell him you wanted a word before the announcement." A short silence, then the door opened. Desmond walked in with a half-smile already prepared, the kind that said, "Whatever this is, I can handle it." He had his jacket buttoned, his tie straight. He looked like a man who expected to be handed something good. He saw Talia. The smile stayed on his face for a moment, the way a light stays on after you flip the switch, briefly, uselessly, and then it was gone. His eyes moved around the room. Augustus, Gerald, Yolanda, Patrice, his mother. Mom. His voice came out lower than he intended. What are you? Sit down, Desmond, Augustus said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Desmond sat. Talia remained standing. She pulled the top document from the stack and set it flat on the table in front of him, clear and plain, the way you'd present a blueprint. This is the forensic audit of Renee Design, she said. My father's firm, the one you've been managing for the last 3 years. Desmond looked at the paper, then at her. Talia, this isn't the time or place to— Page 1, she said. He stopped. She kept going. Over 26 months, a total of $214,000 was transferred from the firm's operating account into a private account registered under a holding company. She turned to page 2 without looking at him. Page 2 is the holding company registration. The contact name on the filing is yours. That money was reinvested. Page 4, she said. The wire transfers from the holding company, moving funds in 3 installments to a property escrow account in Dunbar County. She paused. The condo you put a down payment on, the one you were planning to move into. Silence. With Bree, she added. Just the 2 words, quiet as a locked door. Desmond's jaw tightened. He looked at Augustus. Sir, I can explain the accounting. There were decisions I made in good faith for the firm's development that may look irregular out of context. There are 17 transfers, Yolanda said from across the table, her voice flat. Each one under $10,000, just beneath the reporting threshold. She let that sit. That's not an accounting decision. That's a pattern. The color in Desmond's face shifted. This is a setup. He straightened in his chair. She's been trying to destabilize our divorce proceedings. The affair began 14 months before you filed, Talia said. She placed another document down. Hotel confirmations. Dates. I have the messages. I have the receipts. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences. She looked at him directly. You were still sending her roses on our anniversary. He opened his mouth. Patrice spoke. I knew. Her voice was steady, but it cost her something. I saw the signs months ago. The late calls, the changed password on his computer, the way he spoke about Talia when she wasn't in the room. She looked at her son. Your father did the same things, to me, for 4 years before I found out, and I recognized every one of them in you, and I stayed quiet. Her hands pressed flat on the table. I won't stay quiet again. Desmond stared at her. Mom, I've written it down, she said simply. It's in the folder. Augustus looked at Gerald Park. The lawyer gave one short nod. Augustus stood. The regional director position is withdrawn, effective tonight, he said. I'm also opening an internal investigation into all financial activity connected to Renee Design during your tenure as a firm associate. He buttoned his jacket. My counsel will be in touch. He walked to the lounge door and opened it. The gala noise flooded back in for a moment. Warm light, the murmur of a crowd, the clink of glasses. Through the glass walls lining the corridor, a dozen faces had already turned toward the lounge, watching, curious. Desmond didn't move at first. Then he stood, slowly, like a man deciding if his legs still worked. He looked at Talia. Something crossed his face, not remorse, not exactly, more like surprise, like he still couldn't quite believe she'd done it. She looked back at him with nothing in her eyes that he could use. He walked out. Bree was in the corridor. She'd been there long enough. The glass walls had kept out the words, but she'd seen the documents laid flat across the table. She'd seen Desmond's face. She'd seen Augustus stand and button his jacket. She looked at Desmond when he came through the door, then past him at Gerald Park, who was already on his phone. The condo, she said. Her voice was careful. Where did the money come from? It wasn't a question. Desmond said her name. She took a step back. Her hand went to her stomach. Not dramatic, just instinct. She looked at the man in front of her the way you look at a room after the lights come on and you finally see what it actually looks like. Then she turned and walked down the corridor alone, past the gala's open doors, past the chandeliers that ran too warm near the bar, past the 200 people who didn't know her name. The sound of her heels faded. Desmond stood in the doorway of the empty lounge, alone. The paperwork didn't stop. That was the part no one told you about. That justice, real justice, looked like conference room tables and filed motions and phone calls that lasted 40 minutes and resolved nothing until they suddenly resolved everything. Talia sat through all of it. Gerald Park's office became familiar to her over the following weeks. The same leather chairs, the same framed diplomas on the wall, the same view of the parking structure through the window. She learned which coffee in the building was worth drinking and which wasn't. She brought her own on the hard days. The forensic audit results held up under review. Every transfer, every routing number, every shell company filing, documented, dated, and tied directly to Desmond. His attorney tried twice to reframe the embezzlement as informal business reinvestment. Gerald dismantled both arguments in writing before they made it to a hearing. Desmond was terminated on a Thursday. Talia didn't find out until Friday from Yolanda, who heard it from a contact at the firm. She was eating toast when Yolanda called. "It's done," Yolanda said. "He's out, and Gerald says the DA's office requested the full audit file this morning." Talia set the toast down. She looked at the window. The morning light was coming in low and clean. "Okay," she said. "That's it? Okay?" "Okay," Talia said again, and meant it more the second time. The criminal referral came 2 weeks later. Desmond's attorney called Talia's legal team the same afternoon, suddenly interested in an expedited settlement. The negotiation didn't take long after that. The embezzled $214,000 was clawed back in full as part of the divorce settlement terms. Renee Design, her father's firm, the one she'd handed over and watched quietly hollowed out, came back to her debt-free, its books clean, its name still intact. She signed the final paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon. Gerald slid the folder across the table to her. She opened it to the last page and signed her name at the bottom, Talia Renee Whitfield, and then sat there for a moment looking at it. Renee, her father's name, in the middle of hers, the way it had always been. She closed the folder. Bree had left the city by then. Talia heard it secondhand, from Patrice, who'd heard it from someone at Desmond's old office. Bree had moved back closer to her family. Nobody said more than that, and Talia didn't ask. She thought about Bree sometimes, not with anger, more with something quieter, a kind of tired recognition that there had been more than one person in that story who got used without knowing it. She hoped the baby was healthy. She hoped Bree figured it out. She didn't hope anything about Desmond at all. That part of her mind had gone quiet, and she let it stay that way. Yolanda moved her caseload around and made it work. "I'm not leaving you to hire some stranger," she said, 2 days after Talia officially reopened the firm. She was standing in the middle of the empty studio space, hands on her hips, looking at the bare walls with something close to satisfaction. "Besides, I've been doing paralegal work for 9 years. I think I can handle one small firm's general counsel duties." "You're taking a pay cut," Talia said. "I'm taking an equity stake," Yolanda corrected. "Different thing entirely." Talia laughed. It came out easier than she expected. They spent that first week cleaning out the old files, updating the business registration, and ordering new stationery. The name on the letterhead read Renee Design Group in clean, dark letters. Talia had chosen the font herself. It was the same one her father had used, on the original business cards he'd printed back when the firm was just him and 2 part-time drafters and a dream he refused to shrink. She kept one of those old cards in the top drawer of her desk. Patrice came by most weeks. She never stayed long. She'd bring something, coffee or a plant, or once a tin of shortbread cookies that she set on the front desk without explanation. She'd sit in one of the studio chairs and look at the design boards Talia had started pinning to the walls. She didn't talk about Desmond. Neither did Talia. They talked about the tower mostly, about the lobby concept Talia had been developing since that first afternoon she'd unrolled Augustus's blueprints on the work table, about color and material and the way light would move through the atrium at different hours of the day. Patrice would listen carefully, nodding in that slow way she had, and occasionally say something that landed with surprising precision. "Your father would have understood this building," she said once, looking at the elevation sketch pinned to the center of the board. Talia looked at it too. "I know," she said. The tower was finished on a Thursday in early November. Talia stood in the lobby at 7 in the morning, before anyone else arrived. The atrium ceiling rose 40 feet above her, and the light came through the east-facing glass in long, pale bars that moved slowly across the concrete floor. She had chosen that concrete herself, polished, warm-toned, the color of river sand. She looked at the directory panel near the entrance. The glass was still clean from installation, not yet touched by a single fingerprint. Her name was etched into it in the same font as the letterhead, the same font as her father's old business cards. Renee Design Group, Lobby and Executive Interiors, floors 1 to 6. She stood there and read it twice. The building was quiet around her, and the light kept moving, and she felt fully, permanently, with nothing missing, like herself. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!